Yeah, Sir Keir Starmer has kicked off the election year this morning with a speech urging voters to hold on to the, get with the programme here, flickering hope that life can get better if Labour wins power. I've been asking you about that this morning, whether you believe him or not. Meanwhile, today also marks 1 year since Prime Minister Rishi Sunak set out his 5 pledges. He said that's what you should judge him on in the next election. They were, can you remember, halving inflation, growing the economy, get debt falling, cut NHS waiting lists and stop the boats. Well, not achieved many of those, has he? Still with me, I'd like to say, is former senior military intelligence officer Philip Ingram, and also joining us in the studio is James Heale, political correspondent at The Spectator. Great to have you in the studio. A happy new year to you as well. I want to start with Keir Starmer before we get to Rishi Sunak, because he hasn't actually started. He's doing a Q&A in this town hall. This is a US invention, is this town hall, chatting with people, I think at a primary school in the East Midlands. We've already had Keir Starmer there giving a speech. Should we have a little, actually, have we got the clip of Keir Starmer we played a little bit earlier. We'll get to a clip in which he talked about his New Year message of hope, and how people had a chance to vote in an election that could change the character of politics. So let's have a little watch, a little listen. Do try and stay awake, everybody. I know it's hard, but we're going to pay attention. It's going to be interesting afterwards. But Keir Starmer, this is what he told voters this morning.
This year at the general election, against the tide of cynicism in Westminster, the gauntlet of fear the Tories will unleash, and, most of all, the understandable despair of a downtrodden country, I will ask the British people to believe in it again. I will say, you're right to be anti-Westminster, right to be angry about what politics has become, but hold on to the flickering hope in your heart that things can be better, because they can. You can choose it. You can choose the hope of national renewal, the responsibility of service, what politics can and should be. And you can reject the pointless populist gestures, the low-road cynicism that the Tories believe is all you deserve.
3, 2, 1, back in the room. No, genuinely, that was actually, all credit to him, that was actually, it's a 50-second clip. Yeah. Better. I normally have to tape, I have to Sky Plus speeches because I can't stay awake during them. I think this is a major flaw. I think Rishi Sunak is not much better. We are not in the age of the inspiring British political speaker, is he? Are we? But there we are. In terms of all the hopey changey thing, urging voters to hold on to this flickering hope and the like. James Heale, you follow these things very closely. You are well inside the Westminster bubble. Is this a game-changing speech? And if not, what's the point of it?
Well, watching that speech today, I was reminded of another time I've seen Keir Starmer give a big speech in front of robotics and machinery. It was January 2023. 1 year on, it's like Groundhog Day. It's the same themes, no new policy. This is really about, I think, shaping the priorities and saying, you know, we're going to be slightly different, hope and change, as you say. And in this speech, there was something for everyone. So the Guardian will love the fact that it was like cleaning up politics. Telegraph will love the fact that it's not politics and dressed up as virtue, which is anti-Corbyn. So there's something for everyone, really. And it's basically about, I think they've decided to jettison a big policy announcement that Corbyn liked to have in 2019. And it's really just about setting the priorities and saying, we're going to be very different and trying to...
Well, yeah, but you need to have... We're going to be very different and people are going to go, how?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the question is that they're going to put some of this stuff on the agenda later this year, but really it's just about saying to the voters, a bit like Thatcher did in the late 70s, don't just hope for a better life, vote for one.
Yeah. I wonder how much, I mean, I think voters they're crying out for some honesty. Yeah. You know, there's no point telling a load of people who are worried about putting the heating on, who go to the supermarket and, you know, the cost is twice, well, it feels like, you know, it's 30% more, but it feels sometimes like it's twice what you used to pay. People whose kids are at rubbish schools, whose, you know, grandma or, you know, mum or whatever is waiting for a hip operation for the last year, can't get a GP appointment. Everything they're spending money on is going up. You know, local council services don't work. I mean, you name it. I mean, you know, people are just looking at the streets falling apart. There's no point saying, hey, everything's great, let's have more of the same. There's no point not being honest with people. They can see it with their own eyes. They can feel it in their own pocketbooks. However, when you're basically saying, oh, the country's gone to hell in a handcart, everything's rubbish, do people like like, politicians telling us that?
I think it's a sort of middle ground here, right? So you don't want to be full boosterish because everyone could see, well, we're not going, frankly, that great. But also they don't want doom and gloom. And I think this was a speech today, hopefully to chart a middle course between those two of them. I think realistic optimism was how someone in the Labour described it to me, was just trying to convince the voters that, look, we get things are pretty bad, but we're going to be able to work on them. And I think that was his speech today. And you can argue that, Keir Starmer wants to bring back boring, and he certainly did that perhaps a ton since the speech today. But the more serious point is that he's just saying, look, I want to take this thing out of politics. Remember, of course, 2019, Get Brexit Done was partly about getting rid of the politics out of everyday people's lives because people were obsessed about it because we've been talking about it for 3 years. And I think he's thinking after the ups and downs of the past 4 years or so, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, etc., people want a bit of stability, and that's what he's offering.
Yeah. I'd like to say, by the way, that all that happened with Liz Truss, Boris Johnson and everything, that was not as unstable as Keir Starmer when he was Shadow Brexit Secretary, trying to get not only Jeremy Corbyn elected, a man who's totally unfit for public office, but also trying to stop the enactment of a democratic vote for Brexit. The destabilising that we went through in 2018, 2019 was far greater and far more damaging to our democracy and to our country, I believe, than anything that happened since. And by the way, most of the bad things that have happened since then, as a result of COVID policies and lockdown policies, which Keir Starmer would have done, double down on. We'd have been in lockdown sooner, longer, deeper, more money would have been spent, flashing the cash. We would be in a worse state right now. And this is the thing, Labour also, by the way, in office in Wales. People can look, what would a Labour government look like? Well, let's have a look at Wales. Well, it doesn't look very good.
Well, I think the most interesting critique of Keir Starmer is that, is he a true political original? Or is he just someone who goes along with a consensus? And I'm not sure if he got into office, say, there's been much which suggests that he would be someone who could, either bring his party on a political mission as Blair did, or someone who's able to challenge orthodoxy at times as Boris Johnson.
Well, do we know what he thinks about anything? I mean, he's known as Mr. Flip-Flop, and that is something that definitely sticks in terms of criticism, because there's always going to be a clip of him saying something opposite from what he's saying now, because he said very different things to appease the left in the Labour Party to get elected in 2021, wasn't it? And at the end of the day, no, not 2021, 2020, yes. It's all I'm just trying to forget all of those years. And now he says completely different things, but he also takes a long time to make a decision. There'll be in a major event, something which requires a political commentary, and that he's focus grouping it and asking, well, can I say that or should I say that? There is an element where I think we're going to be in Gordon Brown territory, and that was a man who actually knew what he thought about things. You could agree or disagree with him, but he was, he was a chancellor who had to, deliver a budget and a spring statement. But when he suddenly was a prime minister, you have to make 15, 20 decisions every single day. Yeah. Snap decisions, because that's what you have to do. He couldn't do it. I don't see Keir Starmer being able to make a decision, one a day, let alone 15 or 20.
I think that's a real thing. And you can get all the people around from the New Labour era all you want and say...
And they've surrounded us.
Yeah, massively.
Just like Bill Clinton bringing back all the Obama people.
Oh, yeah, completely. It's basically... But the problem is that politics has moved on, and the pace has really sped up. You've got things like WhatsApp and Twitter, etc. And just the machinery of government, and we've seen over the last few years, just isn't ready to cope. And I'm not sure, as you say, if you had a Labour government tomorrow, just by dint of having Labour people, they're going to necessarily be morally better or technically better.
Indeed. And in fact, that's interesting. Philip Ingram, that's something, you're a military man rather than a political man, but actually these things are very much intertwined, so you have your fingers in a lot of pies there. But this is one of the key things you pointed out earlier. Actually, we were saying about the economics doesn't change, the world, situation doesn't change, the pressures we have on us economically and militarily as well. But also, crucially, they're still going to have the same civil service, and everyone seems to think, oh, it's going to suddenly be miraculously different once Keir Starmer's prime minister.
And the military is a political tool and is only used to fight whenever the political side of things has failed completely. So,
well, we just draft the military, and every time...
They're inexorably linked.
Whether it's the NHS or schools or...
And Labour hasn't got a good history of taking us to war, as we've seen in the past, when you're getting the populist Labour Party with Tony Blair. And I think we're going to hear an awful lot about NHS England policies and school policies in what's coming out. But we have to recognise that that's England only. That's not UK-wide.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing an awful lot of UK-wide stuff coming out of
that's interesting.
Out of steer.
Well, we're going to see policies fleshed out more when it comes to the next general election. But again, there aren't going to be big promises. Particularly because there isn't any money to deliver big promises. You can't borrow a load of money. Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng proved that. You can't spend a load of money without putting the taxes up. Well, there's only so much more tax you can squeeze out of people who are suffering.
Well, quite, and I think that was the most interesting thing that came out of the Q&A after the speech today, was asked about Rachel Reeves versus Ed Miliband on the Green New Deal, because it's going to cost up to 28 billion.
Well, this is the pledge, isn't it? Just explain what that is.
Well, this is going to be the investment to try and decarbonise the UK by investing money over the number of years.
Can we not use the word investment?
Oh, sorry.
Investing,
course, yeah, I'm guilty,
you're
yeah.
actually going to...
Taxpayers' money.
Spending £28 billion a year of our taxes on new technology, which most of it's not even proven, by the way.
And exactly, and so this is based on similar to what Biden's done in the Inflation Reduction Act over in America, and it's their way of basically appealing to the Green vote, as well as people who want bigger public spending, investment, etc. Of course, I shouldn't use the word again. But and the point is that this has been a real flashpoint, because Labour's obviously trying to be very fiscally credible. And I thought the answer that Starmer gave today was, he said that he would only go along with it if it was going to be within Labour's fiscal rules. And I think that was an interesting shift. I know, but of course those rules can be flexible, as we all know.
Yes, absolutely. And again, most of us don't pay that much attention to them and can't do the numbers. I don't think most Labour MPs or Tory MPs, or indeed most journalists, can do the numbers either. Well, this, of course, is on a day. This is the big relaunch for everybody, beginning of an election year. It's gonna feel like a long year. It really is, isn't it? Rishi Sunak is going to be judged today, I think, on his 5 pledges he made exactly a year ago today, on the 4th of January. Halve inflation, grow the economy, get debt falling, cut NHS waiting list, stop the boats. Stop the boats, the one we focused on an awful lot. He hasn't stopped the boats. They went down a bit, but they're going to go up again. We're told, expecting this year, Border Force is saying. NHS waiting lists, still sky high. You can't blame the junior doctors' strikes for all of that. Getting debt falling, I think it's starting to fall. Growing the economy, growth flatlining. Halving inflation, yes, but let's face it, I mean, inflation was going to come down anyway, and didn't really have much to do with the government either way. How do you rate Rishi Sunak in his first year since this year and a bit in office?
I think it's probably been a very difficult challenge. I think I'll probably give him a 6 out of 10 on it, because I think...
That's high.
I think that you can make mitigating circumstances for each. But I think, look, the key thing is, what is the big central message? And I think looking ahead to this election year, as you've said, Julia, like 2019, we had Get Brexit done. 2010, for instance, we had change. What is the big message? What is the big philosophical driving force of this government?
It's been rubbish.
Yeah.
We'll make it less rubbish.
But exactly.
Oh, that's really something to... inspire us.
But also, is it a 5th Tory term, or is it a new age of Sunak? I mean, Boris Johnson was very able to distance himself from the past 10 years of Tory government when he ran in 2019.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure sometimes if he's the continuity candidate or the change candidate, etc. And you may well say, well, look, it doesn't matter how we got here, but we will lead you up, making to a better sunlit uplands. But the point is that, I think people are just turned off by the Tory brand. And people might not love Keir Starmer, but they don't like the Tories.
But that's the thing. The polling is very clear, isn't it? That actually people are very angry with the Tories. They're fed up, but more of the same. They want to give them a kicking. They want to but also just time for a change. There is just a natural sort of flow and ebb, isn't there, in election cycles? But they don't really think much of Keir Starmer.
No, and I mean, it was interesting. I was at the Reform press conference yesterday, and they had this
I want to come to that. Yes.
New slogan, Starmageddon, warning of the dangers of Labour.
I think that's a great. I think that's a great word, though. That's going to catch on.
I did enjoy, and also the graphic artwork, which was quite suitably apocalyptic. But I think what was really interesting was listening to Reform, and their message was entirely like Labour's, which was, let's get Britain back, let's save Britain, etc. And I think that's the real thing, is that all parties, other than the Tories, will just attack the Conservatives, and it really feels like an anti-Tory election rather than a pro-Labour one. Yeah,
that's absolutely the case. Well, let's come back to what Richard Tice had to say, Reform UK, warning that a Labour victory would mean economic chaos and crisis, Starmageddon. They've also crucially said they are going to stand a candidate in every single seat. They'd vowed to do that before, of course, 2019 election, and then basically decided to stand down roughly half of their candidates to basically give a clearer run to the Tory candidates. Of course, I think that was the Brexit Party, wasn't it, really? It's difficult to keep up. There have been a lot of iterations involving Richard Tice and Nigel Farage, who's still, of course, president of the party. Basically saying there will be no pact with the Tories this time. They're going to go do it. But analysis suggests that if that is the case, all they will do is they won't get a single person elected, and realistically, they will just hand the Labour Party another 35 seats. And at the same time, Lib Dems, Sir Ed Davey said he won't rule out a coalition with Labour, but they ruled out one with the Tories. that makes it more and more of a likelihood, perhaps even a certainty, that Labour will get elected.
Well, exactly. All these little things then add up and cause a huge, big problem for Rishi Sunak. And I think what's interesting was that Richard Tice's messaging was purely, very Thatcherite, I thought, was talking about things like the bonfire of EU laws, was talking about the bond markets, for instance. This all seems very much designed at sort of Southern Shire Tory voters, rather than, say, some of those red wall Labour voters who traditionally voted Labour and then maybe have gone Tory last time. So I think that, as you say, Julia, is that if they do get 10% in the polls, if they get something like half that, that could cost the Tories about, a dozen or two dozen seats or so. And all of this means it's a lot easier for Keir Starmer, unlike 2019, for instance, when all the Remain parties were squabbling over the same amount of the vote.
Yeah.
This time, I think it's just really...
It's the other way around
exactly,
now,
yeah.
absolutely. And again, I think a lot of it will be people not bothering to vote. I just think, go out and vote. It's really important. And the worse our politicians, the more we need to vote. Can I